Hello, everybody. Welcome to the AParent Voice. I am your host again, Bernita Bradley, and here on this wonderful, fabulous, rainy Friday in Detroit, and have a couple of beautiful guests here. We know, so let me start out by saying we know that schools are about to open back up, especially here in Detroit. We do have some school systems across the country that have decided they were not going to open up. They are going to open virtually. But here in Detroit, schools are planning on opening up. And with that being said, we've already had a couple of COVID cases at Detroit public schools. And parents are concerned. Parents are very concerned, and parents are trying to make their exit plans. Parents are deciding that they want to homeschool, what it might look like to homeschool, pod schooling, um, freedom school models, and they just want information. I've heard from tons of parents who say like they're really ready to do things, but the problem is they don't have the information, and they're a little leery about just dropping out of school. And so a couple weeks ago, I got a letter from Ben DeGros from the Mackinac Center about homeschooling, and they put some interesting information on their website about homeschooling and supports for families, which I thought was just really wonderful to see an organization going to that extent to actually help engage community around what your choices are. Choice is one of the most beneficial things there is at any time in a child's education, and it would behoove us to not allow parents to access and practice choice during this pandemic. Our local leaders, school leaders, the other day were on a town hall, and everything they kind of alluded to was that parents are ill prepared and should not be doing homeschooling or should not be possibly pursuing pod schools or anything. They should basically be trusting in the schools to educate their children. And we know from even my show and from other people's platforms that homeschooling has been very successful for families. It's been very successful for people who deemed like years ago, I'm done with it. I'm done. I'm doing homeschooling for various reasons. Some were educational reasons and some were just personal choices, period. All of it was a personal choice, but still some were other circumstances that caused them to homeschool. So with that, I wanted Ben to come on and we just have a wonderful conversation about homeschooling. And with us also, we have Leanne Van Beek. Forgive me if I pronounced that wrong, but she actually is a homeschool mom. She's coming from a professional standpoint, but a little bit of a different level. She's done this. She's kind of a trooper at it, and I like to say that parents are the master of their own domain, and she's one of the masters of homeschooling. So based on her bio. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite Leanne and Ben to come on here. And everyone, please remember to like and share. Please comment, make as many comments as you want about the show. And even if we don't address your questions today, we will make sure we get those answers for you and put them in the chat. And most likely this won't be the last show, or the last show that they'll be on with me. So thank you guys. Thank both of you.
Hey, so good to be with you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So Ben, I'll have you go first. You go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with the Mackinac Center.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Mackinac Center, we're up here in Midland, but we're focused on helping parents all over the state of Michigan, giving parents a voice and empowering them in education policy, because everybody else seems to have a spot at the table when it comes to decisions about how schools operate. But parents seem to get short shrift when it comes to that. And so we're all about educational freedom, empowering parents. And if that is your district school and it's working well for you, great. If a charter school works better for you and your family, great. If it's online versus in person, you know your family best. If it's a private school, homeschool, we want parents to have a level playing field and the power to make those decisions. And so that's what I'm privileged to do professionally, and just honored to be with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that work. And that's the reality. Like choice is our choice, right? And we make those decisions, but we want to make sure we make them with the best tools possible to make them, right? So Leanne, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're on mute. Yep.
There we go. Thank you. I'm Leanne Van Beek. I have 3 children who are now 12, 10, and 8. And I was a public school kid myself. All my family was in public education. And so when we got to the age of putting my son into kindergarten and my husband wanted to homeschool, I thought he was crazy. I told him he could do it if he liked the idea so much, because I really loved my job and I wanted to keep working. And so the more I looked into homeschooling, and we'll probably talk about this more later, the more I realized how efficient it was, how flexible and free it was. I decided to keep working and homeschool. And I worked full time and homeschooled my family for about 6.5 years, which included some time of running my own business full time. And just this last year, you know, the elements in our life, the phase we're in, I decided to cut back from work for a little while. But so my journey has been an interesting one, both from learning how to shift from a public school mindset into this homeschool space and how to juggle some of the other elements of working and family kind of at the same time.
Right, right. And I think you opened up with a good point about that working and homeschooling, because that's what everybody keeps saying. Like, how do people work and do this? Like, kids need to be in school. Parents have to work. Kids need to be in school. They have to be in school. They have to be in school. And a lot of the parents are even saying, like, how do I do this and work? That's the biggest thought and challenge in their minds, right? And so, can you speak a little bit? Go back and talk a little bit about what that transition period looked like, because you said you were on the other side of the fence. Like, nope, you can do that. I'm doing what I'm doing, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. The transition for me was, my husband brought a lot of interesting articles home and books. And the more I started looking at the school standards and what my child had, like, was literally legally required to learn, the more I started realizing, wow, like, I can do this in a couple hours a day, or at the time for kindergarten, I can do this in an hour a day. Why wouldn't I, at those young ages, keep working and find another childcare arrangement that would allow me to teach my kids from home? In that time frame, it was easy enough to just I asked my employer if I could come in a little late and leave a little early and then pick up some hours on the weekend. When I was obviously self-employed, I could really structure my day as I needed to. I think another big piece for me in making the shift from a mindset perspective, and again, everyone's unique with this, was, to me, the classroom looked like the school classroom. And so people would always ask about socialization and dynamics of, gosh, if you pull your kid out of school, how are they going to socialize? And one really compelling article that I remember reading said, is it really socializing when you have your 10-year-old with 30 other 10-year-olds day in and day out? And I remember being so struck by that because, again, as a public school kid, I never thought anything different. But man, the socialization opportunities my children have had across generations, and just with all the different activities and groups we do, has been phenomenal and so rich in a way that, like, my public school education didn't provide me. So that was another helpful mindset shift for me in making that leap.
Right. And then thinking about the fact that everybody keeps talking about the social emotional needs for kids to be around one another, right? But right now they actually can't. Even if they go to school, they cannot socially, interact with one another the way that they generally would, right? So Ben, tell us a little bit about the project that you guys have going as far as homeschooling.
Yeah, and then when we at the Mackinac Center saw what was going on, after the COVID issues started and parents had to deal with learning at home, and then as we saw the summer going on and it looked more and more like, a lot of the schools are not going to open fully, or parents are kind of stuck in this in-between place where, this is a whole new situation. And we started hearing, from people who, I'm thinking about homeschooling, but what is that? It's kind of scary. It's new. Those homeschoolers are a little strange, aren't they?
That's what people think, right?
Right. So we're trying to normalize that and just provide some information, because what our expertise at the Mackinac Center is laws and policies and understanding how government works. And so we put together the information website, MI for Michigan, schoolathome.org, and just wanted to lay out what are the kind of different options that are available for families and link to some basic resources that would get them started and make them start to feel confident that they could find something that matches their family and that they could do it and take charge of their own kids' education. So we've got information on homeschooling, like what Leanne's family does, and some of the different ways you go about that. There's really not a lot to start homeschooling, but there's also a lot of resources out there you can tap into once you start. Or then things like if your family needs more structure but is not as interested in as much freedom and flexibility, online public schools, what does that look like? Or cyber schools, how do you get into that?
Yeah.
What other innovative programs are out there that allow parents more flexibility, whether it's homeschooling, online schooling, or all that. So we want to just put that on. That's mischoolatHome.org, and we've gotten some good interest and response so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about a lot of people have said this is attacking choice. Like they're literally saying giving parents choice is attacking choice. So what would you say to that?
I'd say it's kind of outrageous. I mean, we're at a point right now where I think you alluded to at the beginning, families need educational choice now, probably as much or more than any time ever. And yet the system is pushing back hard, and maybe harder than they've ever pushed back, to limit choices. And to use confusing rhetoric like that it's not really in parents' best interest, right?
Yeah.
Parents know if they have a clearer idea than ever after this last spring, if their child is enrolled in a district, they know they got to see a little more up close and personal how that day-to-day learning interaction with the teacher or no interaction with the teacher, what that looked like. And so they know if that's what the district is planning to do going forward, they know if that's the right choice for their family or not. We want to expose them to the range of other options outside what the district is telling them exists.
Right. And I'd really like to reiterate to parents also, this is not like something where we're trying to tell you have to do something, or even downing parents who decide like I have to send my kids to school, right? It's not that, but it's about giving parents, again, that access to information that they need. So I would like to share the screen just for a moment on the website that you were talking about, Ben. Okay, I gotta ask for permission to share screen. Forgive me. Okay, so I'll wait for a minute and see if she give me that permission to share screen. You may be permitted now. No, not yet. Okay, so in a minute I'll share that screen. But yeah, so when you think about the tools, what are some of those tools, Leanne, that you needed first, that you saw as a mom who was working, that you needed outside of, I know you said something about the pamphlets and things that your husband was bringing home.
Yep. So that I would say were definitely educational resources in terms of that. And if it would be helpful, I could maybe see if I could put together a list that I could send you that you could distribute.
Okay.
But for me, my first step, again, coming from the school setting, was to go on, and for me, I live in Michigan, so I looked at the Michigan Department of Education's school standards, and I just pulled up the PDFs, which are great in terms of outlining the kind of content that the kids are learning in the classroom. For me, that gave me a comfort level off the bat, right, of feeling like, okay, I have this awareness, I understand the types of things they're working on. And so in the beginning, truly, I did stick pretty close to those in the first few years. As I gained confidence and I started having a better sense of my kids, which, quick sidebar, I know how many parents have said to me, I could never homeschool my kids because I don't know how to teach. You teach your children every single day, and you teach them all kinds of valuable things. So what you might not know is chemistry. There's help for that, right? You might not know exactly how to teach your kid to read. There's a manual that will walk you through that. But what you do know is the pace that your child is ready to go, what they're excited about and interested in, and how you can feed that interest and make learning something that they love and want to do, as opposed to something that they just have to jump through hoops. So back to my point, that as I got more confident, I started looking at the school standards and doing things like saying, okay, 4th grade science is earth science. My kid is not interested in that, but they're super into biology. So we're going to just pack on the biology this year, and we're still learning science and we're growing. And so I think for me, the resources were both kind of the school standards, gaining confidence, and the first thing I most recommend to anyone who wants to homeschool is finding a mentor, finding someone who has been homeschooling, who you can say, okay, this is what I'm excited about. Here's what my kids are excited about. Here's what none of us are excited about. How do I build a schedule that works for me and my family? How do we pick curriculum that's not going to stress us out this year? Because I think the one thing I would really like to say to parents is that this is a year, right? Like as overwhelming and scary as it feels right now, there's not much you can do in a year that will so dramatically impact your child that they can't rebound and learn, right? So be confident. There's lots of situations that I think this can really be okay in.
And it's strange that you say that, because people are using the pandemic time that the kids weren't learning. You know, there were a lot of kids that weren't learning anything, right? On traditional learning, what they consider traditional learning, right?
Yes.
And they're using that to say, oh, that 4 months, like they are so behind, they have to be in a school. If they are not in a school, you are going to put your kid at a deficit, and they're not. Do you know how long it's going to take? And then poor families and Black families have been at a deficit forever, and they're not going to catch up, and it's going to make a greater divide, right? But what they weren't talking about is the things you're talking about now, like those intentional learning times when kids were like, well, Mom. So my daughter the other day, we were in the backyard, and she said she wanted to catch a firefly for my grandson in this mason jar, just so that when he comes home, he can see it flicker in the house. And she went on this whole journey of catching this firefly. And I wonder, what is the inside made of? Let me see. Let me look it up. And then I'm cleaning out the car while she's doing this at night. And I instantly looked at her. I said, you know what you're doing is homeschooling right now.
Yes.
And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, what you are doing is homeschooling, right? You just didn't apply it like that because we make school seem like it's this scientific research theory thing that everything has to be so profound, right? You know, but that little incident, moment was profound for her because she was happy learning about some fireflies in her own backyard, you know. So let me share the screen now, Ben, so you can talk us through the website just a little bit.
Okay.
So can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is the website, guys. School Home in Michigan. Did I go all the way to the top? Yeah, I'm all the way to the top. So what should we, just talk me through it. You tell me what to click and I'll click.
Absolutely. And first thing that Leanne also alluded to is, you know, you probably have a broader audience than just Michigan. So some of these things are Michigan specific, but we could also go into, for people who are maybe from other states, there are a lot of similar opportunities in other states. There's also probably additional opportunities in some states that Michigan doesn't have. But it's a great place to start the conversation. So why don't we jump on the first link there where it says Homeschool Basics. Right? So one of the things that Michigan really has going for families, more than most states, is a real incredible freedom to homeschool. And we have some legal decisions that allow that to happen. And, you know, people say, well, what do we have to do to homeschool? Really, you don't have to do anything. That's kind of the weird part about it. But to start homeschooling, you don't have to tell anybody. You might want to, as a courtesy, right? Tell your local school officials that, hey, we decided to homeschool. But the idea is you're going to provide a basic organized educational program to your kids, and you're going to teach them these subjects: math, reading, English, science, social studies, and you're just going to keep track of how they progress. And you know your child's strengths and interests best, and you can monitor their progress effectively. So the thing about homeschooling now versus a generation ago. So my mother-in-law, my wife's mom, she started homeschooling her kids before it was legal, back in like the 1980s. And you hear stories from her and what homeschooling was like then. And everybody was just kind of making it up as they were going. and there
Yeah.
weren't a ton of resources. And you were kind of afraid that the school officials were going to send a truancy officer some days. You know, we're past that now. That's the good news, right? We have a ton of resources that are out there, and Leanne probably can speak to these more even than I can. But some of these links here, like the homeschool methods and the choose the curriculum, just pretty basic descriptions. These will take us to other websites, and you know, for example, the appropriate curriculum one it's another resource that will list a bunch of different homeschool curriculum. All right, this is it as a Rainbow Resource Center. So if you scroll down, it's going to ask you if you have a privacy policy. So pick any one of these. Pick the math one where it says download a math curriculum, just as an example. They're all similar to this. So you have a comparison chart. There's like 2 pages of what kind of math programs are they, and they got what grades are they available for? Are they religious, non-religious? What kind of philosophy are they using? How involved is the parent versus needing extra help from a teacher? And you can start to see like there's a lot of options out there. Now, Leanne might say this is scary and overwhelming people, but this is kind of thing we wanted to point people to with our website. So if you want to go back to the original page.
Okay. Uh-oh, where
Too many tabs. I think it's the rainbow.
Okay.
Yep, and back.
Okay.
So, and then we linked to some other resources that that are available from the Michigan Department of Education and the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They provide legal representation. So here, there's a lot of basic information and manuals on the laws around homeschooling. If you want to go read up for yourself in the detail that we didn't provide on the website, we tried to summarize it for people. But basically, when it comes to in Michigan, one of the big questions we get is, well, what about my child who has special needs or an IEP disability situation? So there's 2 options here in Michigan. One is you decide you're a homeschooler and you don't have to register with anybody or tell anybody. The other one is you register as a non-public school or as a private school. Basically, my home school becomes a private school. And the reason why parents might do that, as you see here, option 1 and option 2, the main reason why parents want to do that is if they have a child who needs maybe speech therapy services or behavioral counseling issues. So it's important to note that not all of the things you're going to get on an IEP, not all the disabilities, not all the services are freely available if you homeschool. But if you homeschool as a non-public school, you do have access to a number of services that your local district does have to provide. So that's just one of the things we wanted to point out to parents.
So talk me through that for a minute, because that's a big challenge for a lot of Detroit families, right? They're like, I have these kids and they're getting services. How do I do these services? Because they can't afford themselves to pay for it, right? Like some stuff comes out of your medical insurance through work, or if you get state services or something, but some of the services, they're like, what do I do? So if they register as a homeschool, does that mean that they have to have more children than who's in their home, their actual home?
No, so if either of these options, we're just talking about homeschooling your own child. Under option 2, the non-public school, because you register with the local public school district, they're aware that you exist. And so they are required under law to notify you about some of the services that are available for families with these needs. And that's how that's supposed to take place. Yeah, you also have a little more freedom under this option 2, maybe not freedom, but to work with an outside instructor who has a bachelor's degree or teaching permit certificate to teach your child. That's a pretty rare
and that's funded through the state.
The teacher themselves would not be. So this is the reason why most parents opt for option 1, because it really just puts all the power right under you as the parent to determine these things. And it's just that issue with kids who need some special services that might create a challenge there.
Okay, so go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
know I was going to say, one of the things that Ben and I actually ran across when we were looking at that, and a little more particularly, was that public schools are required to make a percentage of their budget available, right, Ben? Am I remember this? Okay, so the other thing we want to be careful of too is that some funds are available to non-public school registered families, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that every non-public student would be able to receive funds if that percentage of the budget gets used up. So but I would add that a few of our friends who have been working with the IEP dynamic while from home have told us that most of their services have been covered by insurance. And so that, and again, I know that's not as specific probably as what everything is, but I do believe most of the services are covered by medical insurance to some degree if you decide to go on that route.
Okay.
And Ben, you may want to expand on that, but that's a little bit I remember about the.
Right. Yeah, it's a great thing to advise parents to check with where they're getting their insurance, because you may have more coverage and options for services outside the education system that you're otherwise aware. So yeah, we're just trying to make sure parents are informed and up to date on what research is out there, so they can figure these things out for themselves and not get dissuaded by people who may have misinformation or may not have their best interests at heart. So.
Exactly. So let me backtrack for the non-traditional homes, for the what is it called again? Oh,
The non-public school.
Non-public school. Yeah. So when they're doing that, so that means that the teachers are coming from that district that they were a part of.
No, not necessarily. So it pretty much gives you a freedom as a parent to pay for, outside teaching services.
Okay.
In a way that the same way that a private school would hire its own kind of teachers.
Oh, okay. So you're paying as a parent.
Right, and we're talking about the current situation as it is now in Michigan. If you're talking to me as an advocate, as somebody who wants to see policies change in Michigan, which I do, I would like to see more support for that, because what we're seeing now are parents, particularly parents with more means, more affluent parents, who are forming these micro schools or learning pods you mentioned, but they're called by a bunch of different names, where they're getting several families together, maybe a dozen kids from these families in somebody's home or in a community center, and these families are pooling their own resources to pay for a teacher to come in and help supervise and guide the kids.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that I would like to see the state provide a more level playing field, so families who don't have those means can also make that decision if that's the kind of thing that works best for them.
Yeah. And so now that's a large conversation for us, because I've made suggestions of even, partnering with colleges around education, and maybe some teachers, some of their student teachers can provide some of those resources to low-income families, right, in the community. Maybe that could happen. I don't know, but most definitely we want policy to change to offer that to families, because it should happen. So back to the homeschooling under Michigan school statute. So when a parent is doing their curriculum at home, is there any time that a parent should be able to kind of get some of the resources from the school?
From like the local school district, or from
When they're just doing basic homeschooling?
When you're just doing basic homeschooling, there's not a lot of interface or interconnection with the local school district. But if you go back to the page, our school at home page, this does actually kind of segue nice to another important point. Okay, one more. If you go down to the next section, co-ops, partnerships, that one. And Leanne can certainly talk about this part very, very fluently, but I always like to point out that homeschooling is not an individual island that you're on. It's not something you have to do alone. And if you can usually find pretty much anywhere in your community There are already co-ops where groups of parents come together to teach each other's kids, or support groups that provide all kinds of mentorship or resources or things. So homeschooling is not a solo venture. And we wanted to point that out and link to some of the things going on in Michigan. There's also a lot of similarities to these in other states. But since this is Michigan focused, we wanted to point out that homeschoolers have that opportunity to cooperate with one another.
Okay. Okay.
It's also important to know that if you're homeschooling, you still do legally have access to courses through the public school system. So the schools are, at least through Michigan's laws and statutes, are legally required to make their non-essential classes available to anyone in their district. So if my son wants to go and do band at the local school, he can. If he wants to go and take an art class, a foreign language, so there are those options too. And we've also found that often private schools are very homeschool friendly and open to, kind of parsing out a class and giving you a per course fee that you could pay if you wanted to send them there. Public school's free, so that's obviously nicer if you can go that route. But especially, I don't know your audience demographics, but especially once you get to the level where your student, maybe like my oldest, is wanting to play sports and needs to have a certain level of engagement, at least right now, through the public school system. Sometimes that's how families are making that partnership work as well. So.
Right.
And I like that. So that's been a big question for parents. Parents are like the arts and clubs. So when the parent actually pursues that, does that go across the board for charter and traditional public and like everybody? How would a parent do that? Like ask for that?
Yeah, start with the local district where you live. They're supposed to, as Leanne said, provide those elective courses. They're not going to provide the core curriculum, the math and the reading and science, but your arts, your music, your those type of subjects. Those are things that should be made available. And there are some districts around the state that have gone like the extra mile, and they've created things called homeschool partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do in these districts, it's usually a mix of virtual, online or in-person classes where homeschoolers will come in one day a week, and they have funded through the district somebody teaching an elective class, and different homeschool families take advantage of that elective class.
Okay. So
yeah,
it's being done. It's being done. It's just not being done everywhere. Wow.
Right.
Ben, you gonna make me, oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. So everybody, please go to this website. I'll make sure I share it again, right? School at Home in Michigan, I will make sure. So it's myschoolatHome.org. And please do your research. I know we only have a limited amount of time, but there's a lot of parents who are talking about pulling their kids out. Let me stop screen sharing for a minute. There's a lot of parents who are talking about pulling their kids out and going rogue. And I don't want you to go rogue and not know what you're doing. With that being said, let's transition into, I'm gonna ask Leanne to tell me no, I'll ask you last, Leanne, but Ben, just remind me, Leanne, that I want you to tell me a typical day in the life of a mom who does homeschooling but works, okay? I want you to just picture that for everybody, right? Give them a visual. But Ben, tell us some policies that parents could be working on or partnering with, Mackinac Center to change.
Right. So I think some of the things we're looking at the state level, and the challenge in Michigan particularly is we have this really nasty amendment in our state constitution that makes it hard to fund parent choice in private schools. And so that kind of rolls over into the homeschooling realm as well. But we want to see things like stipends or tax rebates that would go directly to families who want to practice homeschooling as an option. And if the state won't do it, there's a lot of proposals going on in Congress right now that would do the same effect. Unfortunately, it's an election year, and politics in Congress right now is pretty messy. But you can always reach out. Yeah, you can reach out to Congress, and there's some There's the School Choice Now Act, which is sponsored by Senator Tim Scott, and that would create something called Freedom Scholarships, where states could take part and through donations to scholarship organizations fund families and students directly. And so there'd be more money available for families who want to try things outside the normal system. Another proposal just came out to convert, Senator Rand Paul proposed converting federal dollars into grants directly to families. So people are talking about these things right now, and there's a lot of interest, and it's just going to kind of get past the election year, I think, for parties to come together and see how important this is.
Okay, thank you. You guys heard it. So we got work to do. We have a lot of work to do as a community, as a country, right? Period. Around education for kids, and to make things accessible for everybody. So I will close with Leanne. Paint us that picture of a typical day, right? I understand that you do have a husband, right? So that was a lot of help, right? But at the same time, can you paint this picture of a working mom doing homeschooling for us?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will also throw out, Bernita, that I started a blog probably about 5 months ago, and it's called, appropriately, Triage Homeschooling. Okay, so if people want to go to Triage Homeschooling, I have more of this kind of listed out for working parents that they can look at. Okay, so for me, remember, I have 3 kids, which is different than 1, right? But for me, I would recommend anyone who's working, and I come from an HR background, you first start with talking to your employer about what kind of flex you have, what kinds of options you have for schedules. The beautiful thing for working parents now is this is a statewide, countrywide issue, right? So it's not like one person asking for something. I think employers are going to hopefully be willing to kind of understand the dynamics. For me, what I honestly had to do was be willing to be a little bit overstretched for a time. I would get up early before my kids were awake and knock out a chunk of work. I would dedicate my mornings pretty much to spending time with my kids. And most of my staff knew, unless it was an emergency, to try to not call me during that time frame. So we would homeschool together through the morning, and it took a little longer because I had 3 I was moving between. And then pretty much from lunch onward, I was working, and my kids knew that even at very young ages, from like 12:30 to 4, mom was really not available. The beautiful thing about this is I think it taught them a lot of independence, and it taught them a lot of how to take care of each other. And quite frankly, as a working parent, I hesitate to say this, my kids did all the chores around the house. I mean, everything. They did laundry, they did dishes, they cleaned things, and we just had a frank conversation about the fact that if I wanted to keep working and they liked being homeschooled, they had to step it up in the house help department. So I would really encourage parents to try to invest some time in helping their kids get up to speed on how to take some of that off your plate. That was a huge piece. I mean, just think about that, right? As a working mom, especially a single working mom, right? Like how to help with that. So then again, I would have more time with them late afternoon, evening activities. And then once they went to bed, again, I mean, I was usually doing work in the evenings, and I was often doing work on the weekends to really make that work. But for me, the trade-off really was worth it. And being able to provide that for my kids and be a part of it with my kids was so fantastic that, I really treasure those years and being able to do that with them.
Yeah. But that's home economics though, right? So that counts as a task.
Yeah.
We want our young men and our young girls to know how to do their laundry, right?
That's right.
I mean, I'm not telling you to have a 3-year-old with a stove with a pot like this, but at the same time, that's home economics. And we used to actually have that in school. So it's making it something that was taken from out of schools. Thank you guys so much. So one more time, Ben, can you tell them the website and how they can contact you? And then Leanne, tell them your blog and how anybody can reach out to you, or if there's anybody else who may want you to be on a panel. And so go ahead, give us your information.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So the website we're looking at, mischoolathome.org. Our main website at the Mackinac Center is Mackinac. And because we're in Michigan, we have to make the spelling tricky. So it's MACKINAC.org. And you can find me, Ben DeGrow, through that website. And the questions about education, getting parents empowered, and funding and promoting students and families over systems. I'm all about all that stuff. So I'd love to hear from you.
Leanne?
Yes, and the blog that I mentioned is called triagehomeschooling.com, and so you can find contact information for me there, as well as you can email me directly. It's just my first initial L, and then M as in Mary, and then my last name Van Beek at gmail.com. I'm more than happy to try to help and connect with as many of you as I can. I think you'll find the homeschool community is really hoping that we can help and be a support in whatever way we can this year.
Yes, yes, yes. So thank you guys. This has been the Apparent Voice. I will most definitely invite Leanne and being back. What I would love to do probably, you guys, is invite you back with some parents who may have questions directly for you, and just get or parent orgs or something like that who will have some questions for you within the next couple of weeks. Because I know we'll have plenty of that. I like that you guys were talking about coaching, because there are parents here like Keisha Gray, Natasha Sansom, who has Miss Connolly, who has, agreed to kind of be coaches for parents to step up and just be that support system for them through this journey, because they know it's a lot of parents who are going to be frazzled, including myself, because I'm homeschooling this year. And but my daughter is like in 11th grade, right? So it's mine is more transition questions, for her, like how she get her transcript and what we do about college stuff. But for the parents with the young kids like you, Leanne, we're going to connect them to Leanne. That's what we're going to do. So, and the blog and all the other resources. So thank you guys. This has been the Apparent Voice. I am Bernita Bradley, your host. I will check you out check me out next Tuesday. And thank you again. Go in peace, go in knowledge, and know what you need to know. Learn what you need to know before these schools open and before your home school actually opens. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
wow.